Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming in this evening to Heritage Salon's second Women's History Month virtual talk, Leisure as Our Standard Black Women Self Care. We have a special guest today, Dr. Kimberly Brown Pelham, who I am so excited about. We have been trying to get together for a while here and just talk and discuss. And we've been going back and forth on social media, sending each other things and talking. And like, we have to do this conversation about so many things. And so finally, we're able to get together and have this talk. And I'm so excited. And thank you so much for joining us. We are going to give it a few minutes and then we'll get started. So stay right there and I'll be back in 1 second. All right, well, we're going to get started. I'm going to bring in our guest here, Dr. Kimberly Brown Pelham. I'm so excited. How are you, sis? How you
I'm
doing?
doing really well. I'm excited to see you. I'm excited
I
to chat
am
with you.
so see. Listen, I have my tea ready, okay? Because I'm ready.
Okay,
Listen.
see, you should have given me the notes because I definitely would have brewed myself a little lavender situation had I known.
Listen, I should have told you. You know, I had to bring the tea. I mean,
Yeah,
how could we not do this without some type of tea? I mean,
I
come
should have
on.
known. I should have known.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for coming this evening. I just telling the audience about how much we've been trying to do something for the longest. And this is finally our opportunity to do it. And I just want to talk. I don't have anything formal. I just want to ask you some questions, talk about your books, everything you got going, and of course, our topic of leisure as our standard Black women self care. And again, this is a part of Heritage Salon, which it promotes Black history, museums, Black historical sites, and historical homes. But every year, I try to have a virtual talk during Women's History Month. And what better way than to have my good sis, Dr. Kimberly Brown Pelham, here to talk. And so I just want to formally introduce her to you all. So if you will bear with me, we're gonna get this thing started. So Dr. Kimberly Brown Pelham is a public historian, professor, and cultural projects and programs leader. She is the founder of the History Consultants Boutique Agency, which is committed to funneling academically sound and ideal inspiring history to the public and private sectors. With a PhD in United States history from Howard University, she specializes in the history of women's images, Southern culture, and the Black freedom struggle. Her contributions to publicly accessible history include programming and narrative work at the Smithsonian Institute National Museum of American History, the National Park Service, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, the Rosa Parks Museum, and Google Arts and Cultural Series. Dr. Brown Pelham is a sought after advisor and employs her expert understanding of the past to provide strategic direction and thought leadership to organizations committed to building a better world. Most recently, she directed Lawrence King Publishing in their latest Black History commercial project for families, Black Heroes, a goldfish card game with an accompanying booklet of biographies. Committed to getting broad audiences excited about history, she has contributed to a number of volumes, as well as authored her own books, including Black Beauties, African American Pageant Queen in the Segregated South. Currently, she serves as program coordinator for the Smithsonian's African Town Slave Wrecks Project and the history faculty at the Florida A&M University. So I am just excited to have, let me say this, Wildcats, yes, this is a rattler here. And we're gonna get past all of that on this good night. And my sorors of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, she is a woman of Delta Sigma Theta. So we're gonna put all of this aside on this night.
And it's
let's
so
get
funny
it out.
too, because when you and I interact, none of that ever comes up. But we have
Ever.
so much that like would seem like we would be polar
Yes,
opposites. But
I know, and it's like that's my sis. You just don't understand. So I'm just excited to do this. And just a little background: a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Ashley Robertson Preston, has introduced us, our good sis. You guys went to Howard University together, and she kept talking about you and said, "Oh, you got to meet Kimberly." Da, 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 da. And I think we just kind of started exchanging stuff on social media. We would see things and we would both be like, oh, we got to do this. And then finally we start talking on the phone and finally we say, okay, let's do this. And we are here tonight. And so I'm going to stop talking and I want you to talk and I want you to tell me about your work, how you started with your study, because we really are here to talk about Black women self-care, leisure as our standard. So let's get into that. Let's talk about that. And let me let you take the floor.
okay, you mentioned FAMU earlier, so I may have a few students on the call, and if I do, I had a few of them message me beforehand and ask like, how do I get my extra credit? So I just want to remind them that they're to comment. I don't know, Jada, do they have access to actually speak on? You have to forgive me, I'm so technology.
No, they don't. But I'm posting some of their
Okay, great.
Their comments.
All right, so post your
can
name and post your comment, and that is how you will get credit for attending tonight. But Leisure as Our Standard is really a play on the title of a new journal that I have called The Negro Woman as Our Standard. And those words speak to the legacy, the imprint, and the cultural influence of a woman by the name of Mary Rose Reeves Allen. I was introduced to Allen and her pioneering work when I was at Howard University. I went to Moreland Spingarn Archives, and the Black woman archivist, Dr. Ida Jones, some of you on the call are familiar with how just intensely intelligent Dr. Jones is, a wealth of knowledge, and she just sort of casually pointed me to Allen's papers. And once I began to familiarize myself with her work, come to find out she came to Howard in 1925. This is considered the university's golden era. So you have people like Elaine Locke, Sterling Brown, putting their imprint onto Howard. Of course, the university is led by Mordecai Johnson, and so it is moving out of, sort of its earlier reputation for being a government startup school, if you will, born out of this Freedmen's Bureau era to address issues related to emancipation and Reconstruction. And now it is moving into, this notion of becoming America's Mecca of education for African Americans. And so she arrives at a really right time in the university's history, and she comes as the founding director of the Department of Physical Education for Women. And in 1925, this woman, and she is highly educated, right? She has a master's degree from Boston College at this point. Black woman, like I'm laying the groundwork for really how bomb she is, and what a pioneer she is. She inscribes the department's motto as the Negro woman as our standard. And so when I come across this, I am immediately taken aback because so many traditional histories communicate the idea of Black is beautiful, as something that emerges out of the 1960s and something that comes from men. But in 1925, you got this Black woman saying, hold up, actually, the Negro woman is our standard. And I just I couldn't even begin to grapple with how powerful something like that was, because you have to understand that this is also the nadir of American race relations. This is the lowest point. You have an extreme rise in lynchings. This is when you see the NAACP and its flags everywhere saying the Negro was lynched today. You see independent Black towns being burned to the ground, Black men being blamed for the sexual assault of white women. And of course, we know that all of that is fabricated. Ida B. Wells and her pioneering research help us to understand that. And so given the turmoil that the nation is experiencing, and her having the fortitude, the willpower, and the vision to say the Negro woman is our standard, right? When the nation is uplifting white women as the symbol for purity and something worthy of protection, for her to be at an HBCU in 1925 and use those words, it has empowered me. It empowered me 10 years ago, and I'm still riding on those words. And my intention is to continue to uplift her legacy and her work, because not only does she use these powerful words to enshrine her department, but she uses her department as a laboratory to empower young Black women in the 1920s up until she retires in 1967. So an extremely long career, a very impactful career, and one that really, I think, influences the color and the culture at Howard University.
This is just fascinating. When I think about the women during that time period, I recently worked on an exhibition here for my local chapter, studying around 115 years of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And I immediately started digging into things, Howard University's journals, yearbooks, and these people were phenomenal in the early 1900s. I mean, nothing stopped them. Nothing. Like, they were unstoppable with what they were doing. And like you said, all these horrible things going on, and they're still pushing along. They're not stopping. They're going forward. They're pushing their agenda. And I mean, how can you not be inspired after reading and hearing and understanding this? And so I can just imagine you, we start getting engrossed into some research. I mean, I spent months working on that exhibit, and I literally fell in love with that time period and what the women were doing. So what does it mean when we say leisure as our standard? And what would that, let's say, look like in the 1940s and 50s? Now, I personally, drop me, minus the racism, drop me in the 1940s and 50s, take me to the Black tea rooms. I want to have my gloves, my hat, the dresses. Drop me there. But let's talk about leisure as our standard and what that looked like during that time period, because we were not able to just walk into a restaurant. We had to come up with our own things, i.e., which we talked about before offline, the Black tea rooms. Let's talk about that.
I'm so glad you asked about that. So again, just wanted to play on words, the Negro woman as our standard, and talk about what leisure looks like, particularly through the view of Mary Rose Reeves Allen. And so she does a number of things during her tenure at Howard University, one of which is to establish beauty bazaars at the university, where she would literally have hair specialists, fashion designers, all kinds of people with connections to the beauty, fashion, and creative industries to come to the university and present to her students. She also established the dance program at the university. She established the Negro Intercollegiate Women's Athletic Tournament, where she would orchestrate these matchups between the women of Howard University and the women of Bennett College and other HBCUs. And so really her work speaks to the ways in which not only is she crafting her own ideas about femininity and beauty, but also what we would call today self-care, right? And so if you look through many of her syllabi and her instructional materials, she's talking about caring for the body, caring for the skin, caring for the teeth. And again, this is 1925. So part of it speaks to indulgence, right? And giving Black women the opportunity to experience leisure and self-care that they otherwise wouldn't experience. But it also speaks to racism and the very real impact of enslavement. And so when we think about Howard University, many folks tend to sort of define it as maybe a part of the elite number of Black colleges and universities. But you got to remember, in 1925, most Black folks struggling. And so really this idea of the Black middle class has to do with posturing and behavior and less to do with money, right? Those who could get their children into such institutions like a Fisk, like a Howard or a Morehouse did. And so there are certainly Black people who have the financial means and do well for themselves, but a large majority of us do not. And so her instructional materials reflect that. How to bathe, how to dress, how to take care of yourself, how to present yourself in a public forum. And so I would say, in her view and in her time period, yes, it speaks to a matter of luxury indulgence, if you will, but it also speaks to the real need to provide education to folks who had not been exposed to a world outside of forced labor. So that's in Allen's view. She also talks about providing, how to provide yourself with a luxury bath, how to create spas within the home, pedicures, manicures, you name it. She goes the gamut. And so as a historian, you have to infer what's happening during Jim Crow America. And what's happening is Black women don't have access to the nail salon. Black women do not, what is it, Elizabeth Arden? She is a rising personality at this time. Her spas sort of represent, you also have to, this is why I love history, because so many things overlap, right? The 1920s also represent the Gilded Age, and those who have and those who, have not. And Black folks, unfortunately, the majority of them have not. And so she's providing an opportunity to do for oneself what you might not be able to experience out of the comfort of your own home.
So I think it's safe to say that this idea of self-care is not new. This is in us. And some people may kill me for this, but I hear to say Black girl magic. And I personally, and that's okay if that's what you believe.
No, she reminds me, I'm glad you said magic, because to me, she's the glamorous Booker T. Washington. People credit Booker T. Washington with teaching Black folks, how to use what they have to experience progress, right? She is teaching Black women how to use what they have to not only experience progress, but do so with a little flair and some luxury and some style. So she's the out Booker T. Washington in my book.
And she is telling us history repeats itself. We don't have to have a lot of money to have that self-care, to take that luxury bath, and you come up with ideas in order to just take care of yourself and be kind to yourself. And I even read sometimes, and it's true, people sitting in the driveway when you park your car sometimes to just breathe, that moment is self-care. So I think it's remarkable that, she was onto something, and we don't realize that that's what we're doing now. Sabrina S., I think it's one of your students. I love how regardless of her situation, she was practicing ways of self-care to spoil herself. Absolutely. And that tells us that as women, Black women, it's so important that we are doing that now. I mean, obvious with this research and everything you've done. So I want to get a little bit into your other book, Black Beauties, African American Pageant Queens in the Segregated South, which I have and have read, and you have not. You are missing out. I think I read it did you release it during the pandemic?
I did.
Okay.
It came out like top of 2020. I know I did a book
Yes.
start in February 2020, and then of course March 2020, everything was shut down.
Everything was shut down. So I purchased it. This is when Ashley was like, "Oh, you have to get this book. You have to read." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I do." And so I purchased it. I advise you guys to go get it yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about you? And let's be clear. We have a campus queen, a Miss FAMU here, alumni. I told my daughter she was beside. She's yes, she was Miss FAMU. So this is, in you. So let's talk about this and the book, why you decided to write this book and the research and all the stuff.
This, I don't know if you guys can see it. Okay. It's a 1948 cover of Color magazine. And Color magazine at the time was one of the larger, more influential magazines along the lines of Ebony, Jet. I think there was another one called like Our Life or something that dealt with African American life and culture. And the October 1948 cover featured Miss Bourdain in her court. And so there are a lot of things that are happening in the 1940s and 50s, right? You are talking about World War II. You are talking about the bravery of Tuskegee Airmen and other Black servicemen who come home to a country that meets them and thanks them with more white terrorist violence, right? You were talking about the early foundation of the modern civil rights movement and the horrible, dark, violent murder of Emmett Till. And so you have to ask yourself, what magazine is featuring Black women as cover girls, right? And the answer is our own publications are publishing Black women as cover girls, and our own institutions are making Black women cover girls. And so I have near me, I just dropped a bunch of stuff. The very first issue of Ebony magazine, where they start the Black College Queen series. I think it started in 1970 exactly. And so once again, you see the Black press as instrumental in ensuring that Black women experience affirmation, that they are lauded, and that there is a space for them in the broader public. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the context and the narrative and the story and the journey of Black women cover girls, specifically these Black college queens, is that education is connected to their significance on these covers, right? And so we know that Miss America emerges out of the desires of white businessmen to bring tourist attraction to Atlantic City. So it's definitely all about bathing suits and bodies, whereby the ways in which Black people approach this issue of beauty tends to be a bit more rounded, right? A bit more meaningful. And I wrote Black Beauties in an effort to capture all of that. And beyond my own experience in that space, anybody who grew up around HBCUs, I think, can attest to the fact that it feels truly like a celebration and a family reunion when you experience Black college homecomings. And so I grew up going to ASU and Tuskegee games, and I saw those girls who were perched on floats, and they had their satin gloves, and they had these opulent white dresses and jewelry, and it was a phenomenal experience. You didn't have to show me but a few times for me to want to sign up for that. So I wrote Black Beauties to really dive into the history of the record of Black women taking up space in this way, because so many times, particularly in the era of social media, we see these headlines, you know, first Black woman to become Miss USA, second Black woman, we got 4 Black women, Miss USA, Miss America. And those things are great. I absolutely think we should take up space in those areas as well. But I also think that when we use white folks and white organizations as the barometer for meaning, you lose the value of history. And so I hope that Black Beauties speaks to the history of the Black press and Black institutions lauding Black women before the so-called modern era.
You are so right. Like, so inspiring to see that with the HBCU experience. And also, our children are seeing us. They're growing up and seeing Black women like we did see Black females, you know, like you said, dressed fabulously with their gloves and looking, you know, just so beautiful. And we don't always see that. We didn't always see it, especially not on television, you know, almost like Blackness is being kind of embraced, you know, during the Black, you know, kind of pride movement or whatever. But this, yes. And this ebony issue, now, did you get that on eBay? How did you get that copy?
I can't tell you how I got that because you might judge me. But it's mine now. But I do get old magazines and so forth from eBay. And one thing that I just love about having girlfriends as historians is, you know, they'll send me stuff. And so Ashley sends me stuff sometimes. Dr. Arlisha Norwood will, you know, send me things. So we're all collectors and we enjoy what we study. So we find ways of acquiring our artifacts.
And we'll have to kill you if we tell you.
Let's just say I believe in a little self-motivated reparations.
So let's talk about, like, out of all the things you studied with Mary Rose Reeves Allen and, you know, thinking about Black women doing that, what must we do today when we look at the research and what you studied? What must we do today that was historically done back then for self-care? I mean, I kind of feel like, and you can tell me this is true, she was almost laying out a blueprint for us now, today, you know, and maybe it feels like, you know, we've always been doing this, but because of the, you know, the world of social media now, you have the reels where people are like, my Sunday morning, and they have the music playing and they film themselves making their bed and drinking their coffee or their tea, you know, and you know, all that stuff. I mean, that's not how my Sunday morning or my Saturday wake up, as you know. We have kids. No, man. It's not that way. However, I will say, as a single woman, please do all, and men, do the things, do that stuff before you know, definitely jump into marriage and kids and all that. But tell me, historically, when you see everything that she did, and like I said, she laid that blueprint, what are some of the things that we must do for ourselves now as Black women? Because we have so much on us. We're wives, we're, you know, daughters, we're girlfriends, partners, we work, we're carrying so much on our shoulders, we're all these things. What is it that we should do when we look at what was done historically?
You're right. She was the blueprint, and I use that word a lot in my work. She laid out a 4-year blueprint for what she called the Howard woman. And she laid out the coursework for becoming, you know, a quote unquote full Howard woman. And it included dietary studies. It included calisthenics and weights. It included dance and swimming and basketball. It included, you know, public posturing and speaking. It included etiquette and all of that stuff. And so she ultimately developed what she called total fitness, and it spoke to the physical, spiritual, and mental wellness of her students. And, it's so interesting to me that people like Oprah, and I'm a huge Oprah fan, so I hope my words communicate that in the way that I mean. But I do find it ironic that Oprah has in many ways built her platform advocating for this idea of your best life, right? And what that means through exercise, knowing yourself, right? And developing yourself spiritually, etc. And again, when I look to the life and legacy of Mary Rose Reeves Allen, she was doing that 100 years ago. And so I believe that we should address each area of our life with detail and specificity and, a degree of seriousness, because when one part of you is not well, no part can be well. And, again, when we think about who we are as descendants of African people, that part of who we are spiritually is not, we tend not to think of ourselves through the European lens or the European framework of who we are as religious people on Sundays versus who we are the rest of the week. You study African spirituality, the earth is connected to the body is connected to the mind. There is no division between those things. And I think when you study scholars and philosophers like Mary Rose Reeves Allen, you see the ways in which they held on to their Africanness in that way, understanding wellness through a holistic lens. And I think that we would do ourselves a great deed by referencing and studying personalities like Allen. Study and rest. I'm reading 2 books right now. One girl's I shouldn't call her a girl, scholar on social media. I think her name is Tirsa Hersey. And she's under the NAP ministry on Instagram. And she's recently written like a New York Times bestseller called Rest is Resistance. It is something that really speaks to me in the present moment. And there is another book by Kate Northrup that I'm reading called, it'll come to me in a minute, but it speaks to essentially women and our lunar cycle and the ways that our bodies are connected to the lunar cycle, and understanding that there is a time for productivity but there is also a time for rest. There is also a time in between, and paying attention to that cycle, paying attention to where we are seasonally. So yeah, I think just being mindful of all of that and thinking about wellness in a holistic way would serve us all well.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Now I just thought about something, and I'm gonna pull it in me a little bit. So I'm in Florida now. They moved back home in Tampa because I'm from Jacksonville. But I take getting my hair done a time of, I would say, self-care, and so I drive about an hour to go get my hair done in Orlando, probably because the girl is just fabulous. But I find that that's a time that I am just driving. I'm either praying. It's in fact on my way there, because traffic is crazy on Interstate 4. I literally take the back roads and go. And there's a part of the drive where it's a dead zone, so you can't get any service. You probably can't hear a satellite radio. And it gives me an opportunity to just be, and I find that's part of my, what I call once a month self-care, that I'm doing that. I'm curious to know, did Alan talk about hair or any aspect of, I think you talked a little bit about the beauty or the makeup. Did she talk about hair and maintaining that as part of the self-care?
So what I like about Alan is that she really is representative of someone who wants to bring solution to the moment, right? And so again, self-care for her is, number one, she's not using the word self-care, right? She's using the term total fitness over and over again. She's talking about physical, spiritual, and mental wellness. Those are the terms that she's using. Self-care, I think, is more of a modern sort of situation that has become even more popular because of social media. In her notes, Allen uses these words exactly, and I'm quoting her. She says, "I've endeavored to bring to our girls at Howard University a program that is unique in terms of our girls' needs, keeping before us all the time the earmarks of the institution of slavery and moving away from this into a race of people who have pride in themselves because they have an understanding and a knowledge of themselves, a glimpse into the future, a spirit of service in their hearts, and a sense of courage to move on in a complicated society such as ours." And so to answer your question, yes, she addresses hair, but it's not in the sense that you need to take 30 minutes and go get your perm. She talks about literally what it means to nurture one's scalp, right? So it really is about an issue of health for her. She talks about cleansing the hair, moving the body. She talks about keeping your cuticles peeled back and underneath your nails clean. And so it leans more toward this holistic lens of wellness, more so than this sort of weekend break, that we tend to define self-care as now. And I brought that quote up because she references slavery. And so she really does see the ways in which slavery has affected her students, and it has affected the world around them. And the language that she uses throughout her coursework is continuously affirming of Black women. And so she also writes that at no time, and again, this is during the Tuskegee experiment, right? When for 40 years, they allowing Black men to fall ill with syphilis, knowingly. This is the United States Public Health Service, not the Klan, but the United States government agency. Anyway, she has the fortitude to write this at a time when America is unapologetically racist. She says, at no time have I doubted the beauty of Negro women. And so she talks about the curves that Black women carry. She talks about our facial features, and she speaks about them as something that we should embrace. And she also mentions that when you carry hate in your heart, it is impossible to achieve beauty. And so in other words, she's talking to racists and saying that ugliness is something that you carry because of your interactions with the world. So yes, she speaks to hair, but it's more from a maintenance and healthcare standpoint.
This woman is fascinating. So the burning question I have is, will we see a course from you, Dr. Brown Pelham, based on all of this research? Because it really does sound like laying a blueprint. And I mean, this needs to go to the masses. Like every Black woman needs to understand, this is not nothing new. This is what has been done. Do I hear a course coming out of this research?
I am crossing my fingers. So the good news is, I'll start with that. The good news is I spoke with a woman chair of the Department of History and Political Science at FAMU today, and my course, Black Beauties, has been approved for fall. So now we just have to make sure that we can offer it remotely so that, those who want to enroll can, regardless of where they're stationed. But yes, it's been approved, and I'm motivated. I'm excited. Black China didn't fill us out. So we have things to talk about in the Black Beauty course.
Oh, you all are trying to make this Wildcat come down to FAMU and take a course. It's funny because my oldest is looking at colleges, and she was like, well, what about FAMU? I said, you can absolutely go to FAMU. I will drop you off. But your mom will never, ever wear that shirt. It's a great.
That's all right. That's all right. As long as you pay that tuition, we good.
Right. That's it. it. That's it. So I want to, your students are blowing up this chat. I cannot keep up with them. I appreciate them coming. They have they just, I can't keep up. But I want to open it up before we get into your latest project. I want to open it up for questions, go through some of these comments. Yes, somebody say this is a great course. And it says, I think that those affirmations were helpful to Black women and people in general because Black people during that time felt less than due to racism. These affirmations are still significant today as we still face prejudices and encouraging words.
Yeah, I want to speak to that. She's right in that some African Americans may have felt inferior, but this is why I love history, baby, because it is much more complicated than sometimes we allow ourselves to consider. And one thing as an oral historian that I've been able to confirm and uncover over and over again is that Black folks' self-esteem was much more intact, right, than we may realize. And I think the outcomes of the doll test tend to confirm that those African Americans who had more interactions with white folks had fragile self-esteem, right? So the kids who were pointing to the Black doll saying that it was ugly, those were kids who were going to school with white folks. But those Black folks who experienced life in these insular segregated communities in their own enclaves where they saw Black doctors, they saw Black professors, they saw Black scientists. And my mother, is someone who experienced segregation, and my grandmother cleaned the homes of white families. And so my mom got many of the white daughters hand-me-downs. And I'm like, this is me when I'm first starting to really study history and take graduate courses. And I'm like, oh my God, Mom, what did that feel like having to get hand-me-downs from a white child? And Mama looked at me like, girl, that was new to me. They was the Gucci, they was the Fendi. What is you saying, boo? And I had never thought about it like that. And so I think we have to do a little bit more serious study as it relates to who African American people are, right? There were certain things that slavery took away from us, but there were certain things that slavery can never take away from who we are. And so the story is complicated. Oppression is there. Violence is there. Struggle is there. But there's also joy. There's also sparkle. There's also pageants. There are tea rooms. There are all kinds of things that speak to Black fabulousness. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write Black Beauties, because I wanted to speak to a more complicated record of who we are.
Yeah, that's so good. This is so good. So King Trent says, what do you feel is the biggest difference in Black women from then compared to now?
We have more freedom. We have more freedom. And that's not to say that Black women now are without struggle, right? But we have some platforms, right? I know many a Black PhD woman now. I know many a Black gynecologist. I know, I got line sisters who are veterinarians and professors and lawyers. So success is all around me. And so many of us have platforms, right? We're sitting on, we're experiencing Professor Wright's platform now. And I think that, our voices to a certain extent have a broader reach. And I do think that we are allowed more freedoms than we have in the particular era that Alan experienced. But I also think that given the current political winds, that some of those freedoms are being threatened, and it's up to us to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. So I see a couple of people are kind of saying the same thing. What are your tips for balancing academics, work, campus involvement, and finding time for self care?
I think Jada should answer this question because Jada got like 4 million degrees, a podcast, a magazine. She just built a castle in Florida. Kids, a husband, and Jack and Jill. So I think the balance question is for her, child. I just drink
Oh my
wine and
goodness.
pray and try to get through the day. But I will say, I think boundaries and rest
Yes.
are key. Again, I told you about the books that I'm reading right now, and I think we do too much. Like,
Hmm.
no way we need to be carrying all that we do. And I think we do
Hmm.
that as a part of grind culture and hustle
Hmm.
culture and girl boss. And is it worth all of that when your health is at risk? Is it worth all of that when you are about to go into a nervous breakdown? Is it worth all of that when your professional reputation, your scholarly reputation is at risk? That's one of the things that I've recently had to consider. I had to leave a dream job last year because I found myself um, I wouldn't say making excuses, but I did have to say, my kid is sick. I got to leave. And that happened so often that I wasn't showing up as my best self. So ultimately, I had to give up the job because I didn't want to continue showing up saying why I'm late or why I can't make this event when ultimately my current life station just won't allow me to have 5 jobs like I'm used to having. So I think at some point you got to embrace a little bit of rest. You got to embrace some boundaries and be okay with not having 50 accomplishments because at the end of the day, like, what does it all mean? I don't know that God is counting all that. But Jada, you let me know what you think.
Yes. I never understood. I knew what the real or word no meant, but it really I became empowered with it when my mother passed away. So I had a very small family. My mom's only child, and I was raised by my grandmother. So grandma, mom, daddy, granddaddy, aunties, everybody's gone. And it was right in the pandemic. And I was not expecting to go through this grief. And it was so heavy. And I had to be real with myself and say, you have to get some therapy and you got to slow down. And my therapist said to me, it's okay to say no. And I felt so good saying no. And out of that, I've learned how to say no, even today. Yes, I'm in a sorority. I'm an officer in a sorority. I'm in Jack and Jill. I have a husband, 3 children, hair to salon. I work full time. I published a book. I write. I do all these things, but I say no sometimes. I There are activities I have to do, and there are just times that I just don't have it. And so out of that grief, I was so comfortable with no. And then also, it's okay if you say no and you don't go to everything. Because if you don't slow down and you don't take that time for yourself, it will catch up with you. And so, even I think the young myself, I should have slowed down and taken my time to rest. And that is so important that you're resting and that you're also taking some time for yourself. And it's so wonderful since I've been in Tampa and met some of the Jack and Jill moms. These women are professional Black women, children, husbands, all of this. And I mean, lawyers, doctors. But when it's time to kick back, we kick back. We went on a spa day. We are just kicking it like it's amazing. But we're all in the same boat, all trying to juggle it all. And that's one of the best things I ever done, not only for my children, but for me, being with other women that are like me, professional, and know the importance of let's go and sign up for this spa on this Galentine's and stay the whole day and drink some wine, whatever we're gonna do, and kick back, eat good, be on the beach. let's do that. And so that is important. I definitely advocate for that. Young people, everybody, get you some rest. Say no. Say no. Um, all these students, they can't listen. I don't know how many
And
students we have.
prioritize, Jada. These students got to
Yes,
prioritize. Stop
yes.
going to the party and do your exam.
Please do your work.
Like, you cannot do it all. You cannot do it all.
You can't, and you will exhaust yourself. But please get your work done. That is so important. That party, I'm telling you, they gonna keep having them parties. They still have them in grad chapter. Okay, it's gonna be so many. But yes, someone in here said, not self-care. Somebody said something about a calendars are very yes, these calendars are. Get you a calendar on your phone. Y'all, these kids know these phones do everything. Task, please, because you have to have that to keep up. And again, your priorities and everything. Yes. Someone says will provide for better rest and better studying, etc. And by just being intentional with your actions. And when the day is over, let it be over. And appreciate your rest because it provides for a clear life. So true. When you go home, when you rest in your dorm, rest. I know it can be so much. I don't know.
I know it's hard too, but get off of social media. Seriously, put some parameters in place where you can do that. I can tell you that I'm much more confident. I'm definitely a more crisp thinker when I have not been on social media. It is talk about confusion and craziness, scrolling all day and the same meme and the same jokes and the same post. It's a lot to consider. So February and March, I tend to be on social media a little bit more just because my work schedule heightens during those months. But believe you me, once March comes to a close, I'm going to take another social media sabbatical. Studies have shown that when you look at those screens before you go to bed, it makes it more difficult to have a deeper sleep. So I would definitely say break from social media.
That is so true. I have to do that for myself. It's so difficult because most of what I do is on social media, but I do take some time, and I'm February and March, like you said, they're so busy. Black History Month, every year I do a post every day for Black History Month, so I'm constantly on. But I try to step away so I can, just think clearly. We just built this pool in the back, and I am ready to just be there and clear my mind from this is another prayer area. We got to relax.
I'm working on my patio. You working on your pool? I'm working on my patio. I just saw my patio leave. So yes, I intend to be outside and not like how y'all outside. I don't want to outside. I mean, in my hammock, reading a book, sipping something.
Okay, Romeo says, speaking of lifting up Black women, your lovely queen students would love if you open that test back up. Listen.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Right there.
Shania Wiley, you need to give Miss Wiley, she done came on the YouTube live, okay? This FAMU student and said, can we lifting up Black women, can you give lovely queen students, can you open that test back up?
And look, Professor Jada, the test was open for 3 days. 3. So you telling me in a 3-day time span, but we'll talk about it offline.
Ooh, listen, I appreciate you shooting your shot. You did it good, girl. You put your teacher on blast. I don't know what's going to happen later, but these kids, I can't wait to teach these. Oh, gosh. She said, we're desperate. Okay, we go.
Not desperate for you.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, Brooklyn says, yes, taking a break from social media is super important. I feel a lot more relaxed and have been improving myself spiritually and mentally because of it. Yes. It's Women History Month. pour out a blessing, Professor. Oh, listen, I don't know what this test was, but these kids are advocating. Listen, y'all, these students over at family. I'm really trying, y'all. I'm trying to help y'all out. Now, I don't know if it's, but I'm.
But see, Professor Jada, this is a blessing because this is extra credit. So I'm always blessing my students. My students have to understand like accountability and like, you know, doing your part too. Dr. Brown will always throw out the extra credit and do whatever I can to cushion your grades. I don't even ask for a whole lot of assignments in the class. All you got to do really is your exam. But
okay. All right. Well, you got to do what your professor, what Dr. Pelham says do, because you do have to listen. Because we didn't have that option. I had to do. So yes, you do have to do.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
ask my professor that. But if somebody asked about the difference between like today and years past, yeah. But it's all good. I'm not judging anybody.
No.
One thing that I will say is it's difficult as a professor in this era, speaking of self-care, right? Because on my end, this is why I'm always praying to hit the Powerball, and I'm asking my husband, please don't make me work no more. Like, please release me. Like, I cannot contribute to these bills because it is a lot. It is anxiety inducing for me when I open my email and there are 30 people saying, I missed the exam because my granddaddy died. I missed the exam because I was in a car accident. And it's just amazing how many tragedies happen right in this 3-day time span. And we're empathetic, we're people too. And so we get it. We know that things happen in life, right?
Yeah.
But as a real educator, one of the things that you want to convey to your students is, you know, accountability and responsibility and, you know, real life consequences, right? For stepping up to the plate or failing to do so. My grandmother died seriously my freshman year in college, and I would never invoke her name as a reason to not do something. You know, it was the opposite for me. My grandmother was the reason to excel, and so it's a lot of anxiety because I know some of those students in my inbox really are going through something. COVID has exacerbated all of our issues. So many of our students are working, they taking care of their families, they juggling a lot. Some of them just sorry. And so like, how do you, you know what I mean? How do you differentiate? But that's a conversation for another time. But I did want to take a moment to talk about like just anxiety and like what it means to open those email after email after email because it doesn't end. My mom asked me recently, like, I had 3 kids and I did my job. Everything was wrong with you. And it's like, Mom, your job ended at 5 o'clock. Like I get like it doesn't stop.
And we're ambitious.
Yeah.
We're so ambitious. I'm always thinking about the next or what's next. And actually, yeah, that's I'm gonna let him ask this question. It's real quick. I appreciate you, Mr. Wright, Dr. Wright Green, because he's working on his dissertation. Now he is the one around here with what 5 degrees. This is 5th degree. I'm done, child. This is he's working on his doctorate. He wants to be a college president. So I'm like you. Can you hurry up? I have to work. Okay, so we're gonna ask your question, Dr. Wright Green. Our last question, and this is a good question. What should be the role of the husband in assisting their queen with self-care? Okay, Dr. Pelham, I'm gonna let you answer that question.
I love when my husband meets a need before I have to vocalize it. I love that.
That's good.
And usually I keep our kids the majority of the time. He works a lot and his schedule is pretty intense. And so like during the day, typically I'm with our children and they're very young. So they require your complete attention and engagement. And I really appreciate my husband. He's what I call our opening assistant and our closing assistant. That because I'm with them during the meat of the day, at the top, he does everything. He gets them dressed, them teeth are brushed before I get up, breakfast is done. So I don't have to do those things because he knows like she's carrying the bulk of the load in terms of hours. So at least I can contribute to the prep work. And that's something that I have not had to ask him to do. He pretty much just kind of voluntarily handles it, or if he sees that I'm at my wit's end, he packs them up and he's like, okay, we got to take a day trip without mommy. So I appreciate when I don't have to say, help me out.
Yeah, that's good. I think my husband definitely like that in the sense of he learned a lot when I started grieving, and like he's a fixer. He's a provider, protector. He wants to fix, and he learned. I just let her, and I depended on him, and I say this all the time. He was literally my eyes, ears, hands, everything, because I was paralyzed with grief. And so he's learned a lot. We've been together like 20 years this year. So he's learned, and I've learned him and how, the mood, even the kids know, what's mommy, you okay? Because my oldest is 14. I have a 12-year-old son and an 8-year-old. And they're actually asking and checking and everything. So that's good. That's good. Okay, I am not gonna hold long, but I want to say that I received my journal today. I was like, I gotta get the journal. Oh my gosh, where is?
And here's a picture of Alan on the back too. It's a little write-up about her.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay, so just on Amazon, we can purchase it now.
Yep.
So this is the Mary Rose Allen Journal. You go ahead and talk about it. What am I saying? You go ahead, Dr. Poe.
Again, it just speaks to her life and legacy and her tenure at Howard University and the motto that really shook the ground for me, and I'm sure was transformational for so many of her students. I had an opportunity to actually interview some women who had taken Alan as an instructor at Howard, and many of them went on to be business owners, instructors in advanced ballet, dance studio owners. And so it is clear, professors, even I think one of my own professors studied under Alan as well. And so it is clear that her imprint was a deep one. Again, this was Howard University's golden era. So many personalities, particularly male ones like Elaine Locke and Sterling Brown and others, get their just due. And I wanted to make sure that Alan got hers. And so I'm still working on synthesizing a career biography that speaks to all that she contributed to Howard, as well as the DMV area. But in the meantime, this journal is out. It's just a little reminder of not only Black girl magic in a general sense, but specifically the Alan imprint.
This is just phenomenal. I mean, I am so glad we are finally able to do this. Like,
me too.
This is wonderful. Like, we did it.
Thank you, friend. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
I'm so glad we did this, and we will be talking because we got more to do. It's just the crust. I got to get Ashley in here. All these scholars. I always say there's so many scholars around me. When y'all sometimes, some days I'm like, maybe I should get a PhD. And then, no.
You can. You absolutely can. You have the juice. It's just a matter of like, what's it worth, And
Right.
I would recommend that anybody who's considering an advanced degree to just ask themselves like what it's worth. While
Mm-hmm.
you're doing it, are there other ways to make money and do less?
Yeah.
Not to say that everything is about money, but I do think that we have to be mindful of um, the labor that our
Uh-huh.
ancestors already put forth on our behalf. And
Mm-hmm.
so, why are we grinding again when the crown has already been paid for? So, sometimes you
Come
need
on,
to
sis.
agree to get the job you want, but sometimes it may not be
Yeah.
necessary.
That's right. That's right. Well, on that note, I thank you all for joining Heritage Salon, our second annual virtual talk on Women's History Month. I have committed myself to definitely doing a virtual talk on Women's History Month. We're gonna see what else happens out of the rest of the year, but you can guarantee I'm dedicating something in Women's History Month to celebrate women and Black women. So thank you all for joining us. I have this recorded, so Dr. Pelham, I will make sure you get this so you can look at those students that would have, because I could not keep up with those students. Fam, you students are on it. They was here. They want that extra credit. That poor baby said, open the test up, but I'm going to get you this recording so you can see it. But stay right here, Dr. Pelham. I want to thank you all for being here. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at heritagesalon.org. I can't promise you it's always something, but when I do post, believe me, it's meaningful. It means something. Go back and look at the Black History Month posts. Those are so important. I'm always trying to expose untapped history. This year I did something for Bethune Cookman. Maybe next year I'll focus on FAMU. You never know. I mean, hey, I have the love for the Rattlers. Now, I'm not wearing them colors, but I have the love for you all. So stay tuned, follow me, and Dr. Pelham stay right there. Thank you all. Good
Bye bye.
night.